Our local North Short Pump housing market is probably going to look a little bit different than you anticipate in 2026. We'll cover it today in your February housing market update. What is going on, pretty people? My name is Chris Elliott, local realtor, resident of Wyndham since 2020, and I've sold over 600 homes in our greater Richmond market since 2013. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to break down the national housing headlines, what you need to know. We're going to compare that to our local, hyper-local North Short Pump market, and then at the very end, if you're patient and you stick around, we're going to share with you the practical tips that we're currently giving to both our seller as well as our buyer clients. Let's jump into it. All right, so for the national housing market, let's first and foremost talk about mortgage rates. So in 2026, we saw a full point drop in mortgage rates, which was great news for the real estate industry. So we started 2025 at roughly 7% interest rates. By the end of 2026, we were just above 6%. I think we were around 6.2. Recently, we saw interest rates drop to, I think it was 5.99, which the real estate industry shouted jubilee, and there was celebration. We had a parade, and then literally within 24 hours, it jumped back up to about 6.06. But we've been hovering at the time of this recording. I think we're at a little over 6%, and experts are currently predicting that interest rates are going to remain relatively flat for 2026. Predicting mortgage rates is tough business because there's a lot of factors that go into it. There's a lot of volatility often in the financial markets, but at least at the time of this recording, all the smarty pants people are saying that we're going to stay relatively flat for this calendar year. So if you've been holding your breath waiting for 3% interest rates to come back, you might want to go ahead and exhale and take some breaths, because it's not looking like that's going to happen anytime soon. For prices, so national price growth expectations is roughly 1.2% nationally for 2026. As you can see from the graphic, there are varying opinions on how much price appreciation we're going to see, but I think two things are worth noting or were worth stood out to me. All but one forecaster is calling for appreciation, so home price growth. There's only one negative Nelly in the bunch, the Mortgage Bankers Association. They're calling for depreciation, but they're only calling for 0.3% depreciation. So I know that you've probably got an Uncle Larry, you probably have a neighbor that is a part-time real estate economist when they are not studying conspiracy theories that is telling you that the real estate market is going to crash in 2026, and that's all fine and dandy. They could be accurate, they could be right, but these professional organizations that have staffed economists that spend a lot of time, money, and energy studying this thing are all predicting more moderate home price growth, so you got to decide who you want to listen to for your housing news. Next, let's talk about affordability, and this is the big one. If you watched any of the elections and lost some brain cells doing so, you will know that every single politician, no matter what side of the aisle they were on, were talking affordability. It was certainly a buzzword. And if you're not familiar how politics work in this country, let me explain. Politicians pay consultants to go out and find out what is on the hearts and minds of voters in the country. Then they talk about those things, they promise to fix them, they get in office, and maybe they fix them, maybe they don't. But one thing we know for sure is affordability is probably on your mind. So when we're talking about affordability, what does that particularly mean for housing? Well, affordability is a combination of three things when it comes to housing. It's home prices, it's mortgage rates, and it's wages. Essentially, home prices and mortgage rates comprise your monthly mortgage payment, and then your wages comprise what's your monthly income. So essentially it's, hey, what's my monthly payment versus my monthly income, right? Pretty simplistic, kind of makes sense. Affordability is actually predicted to improve modestly in 2026, which is great news for the US public as well as us in the housing industry. Wage growth finally outpaced home price growth in 2025, which was awesome. It is expected to do so again in 2026, which is fantastic in my humble opinion. So just to recap, prices and mortgage rates are expected to remain relatively flat, with wages expected to continue to outpace that home appreciation, which is where that moderate improvement in affordability is coming from. Great news for the real estate industry. Another thing that's kind of interesting is the median mortgage payment is expected to dip below the 30% affordability threshold on a median priced home for the first time in 2022. So if you study housing, anytime the median monthly mortgage payment exceeds 30% of the median, monthly paycheck, in simplistic terms, that's when the alarm bells start going off for economists, because basically they say, hey, housing is now unaffordable at a national level, right? And this is particularly great news, of course, for first-time home buyers. Let's talk about inventory, the number of homes on the market. Inventory is growing nationally, up about 10% year over year, which is is great. Buyers have more options to choose from. We're essentially back to 2017, 2018, 2019 inventory levels. So we're not in the COVID insanity, that chaos that we experienced in 2020, 2021, first half of 22. Simply put, buyers have more options to choose from, which, unless you're selling your home, that's a good thing. So bottom line, nationally, we're in a steadier, not explosive market. It's kind of a reset year, not a rebound year. And now the part you've actually been waiting for, let's talk about our hyper local North Shore Pump market. So let's talk about sales activity. Closed sales slowed toward the end of the year, which is to be expected. That's kind of a normal phenomenon in our market. Doesn't indicate any structural issues in our market. It's just normal seasonality. This neighborhood, this area, North Shore Pump always pauses or generally pauses in Q4. Didn't do so during the COVID years, but if you look back behind that in more normal markets, it tends to be a thing and re-engages in early spring. I can tell you anecdotally from the clients we're working with, it's already starting to heat up for buyers out there in the marketplace shopping. Spring has already sprung when it comes to the housing market. Inventory is up compared to last year, so the number of homes on the market, but context does matter. This is still one of the tightest submarkets within Central Virginia, and keep in mind, Central Virginia is one of the tightest markets in the country. So effectively, we are one of the tighter submarkets in all of the United States right now, which is kind of interesting, but it is true. So buyers have slightly more choices than they did during COVID, but they still don't have unlimited choices. I would submit to you, they still have limited choices, but not as limited. Let's talk about days on market, basically how long it takes a property to go from active to under contract. Homes are taking a little bit longer to sell than they did a year ago, but keep in mind, we're still sub 30 days on the market. So in the grand scheme of history, anytime, where the median days on market is below 30 days, we're still in a very hot market. And that's probably the biggest shift that I'm seeing sellers are feeling just in the conversations I'm having. They kind of didn't realize that COVID wasn't a normal phenomenon. And now we're still in a hot market. We're just not in a crazy hot market. I feel like a lot of sellers think they've lost a ton of ground, which simply isn't true. Well-priced homes are still moving quickly, but overpriced homes, a lot of those are sitting or having to make price reductions to sell. Let's talk about list price to sales price ratios. So essentially what percentage of their asking price sellers are getting. We finished 2025 at 100% list to sales price in North Shore Pump. Some homes are selling above that, of course, homes that are priced well, that are in great condition, and homes that are overpriced and or are in subpar condition are selling slightly below that 100% mark. Let's talk about price per square foot and median sales price. Prices have largely stabilized. We're not seeing any dramatic declines. We're also not seeing runaway appreciation. So our market a little bit is kind of flatlined. I would submit to you, we're going to be returning to more, normal 50-year average kind of moderate home price growth in our submarket, in my opinion. Keep in mind, guys, this is what a more stable market actually looks like. So here's the takeaways from our North Shore Pump market for February. The market is a little bit more selective. Buyers are a little bit more tempered. Sellers who accept today's reality are succeeding and doing well, though. The ones that are not doing as well are the ones that haven't gotten the memo that we are not in the COVID real estate market anymore. And those folks are learning the hard way. All right, so you've stayed to the end. I appreciate your patience. Now we're going to give you the 3 practical tips that we're giving to both our seller as well as our buyer clients. For my sellers, pricing is no longer a test, right? I wouldn't recommend trying a price anymore. Those are the folks that end up sitting. And keep in mind, guys, after your home's been on the market for 2 weeks, that initial momentum is pretty much gone. And for the most part, you're left chasing the market, which is not a fun position to be in as a seller. So my recommendation, get the price right from the get-go, get it sold within the first 2 weeks. That's typically when you're going to get the best price for the home as well as the best terms, which is generally what I find sellers want. Secondly, presentation matters more than it has in the last couple of years. Buyers are getting a little bit more picky as they're able to with a little bit more inventory being on the market. So paint, flooring, lighting, and pre-listing prep matters again. It's always mattered, but now it might be the difference between whether or not your home actually sells or sells for a decent price. So in summary, the well-prepared homes are selling, the mediocre homes are lagging. And then last but not least for my sellers, early spring sellers historically do well. So the phenomenon that we generally see in the Richmond market, not during COVID, but kind of before that, was that buyers are usually ready to rock and roll come January. We're already starting to see that in our market, but the sellers don't catch up and put their homes on the market until April and May, because that's conventional wisdom as far as when's the best time to sell. So I personally have seen that the sellers that do extremely well are the ones that list in February and March, because they're basically, the buyers are already there, but they're beating their competition, getting the market, and they're selling in a super low inventory market, which is currently where we're in right now. All right, for my buyers, you have a little bit more control, a little bit, underlying line under a little bit more control than you did previously. We're seeing where buyers are negotiating a little bit more than they have historically, not on every single house, but certainly on some, and especially homes that have missed that initial window of the first 2 weeks. So if a home has been on the market for more than 2 weeks, typically you're able to negotiate a little bit more with that seller. Tip number 2, you still have to be decisive on the nice homes, aka the cream puff. So if a home is in great condition, if it's priced appropriately, that home will sell, and it's going to sell quickly, and there's a good chance you're going to be competing against other buyers. So if you're somebody that wants a home like that, realize you're still going to be in a competitive market. You're still going to have to learn how to move quickly. And then last but not least, waiting on rates will more than likely cost you. So if you are waiting for rates to drop additionally, keep in mind, not only are you going to be waiting probably at least another year, if not more, but more than likely we're going to see more home price growth during that time. So that same home is going to cost you anywhere from 1 to 4% more next year than it is currently. Alternatively, if you bought it now and then refinance when rates, if and when rates go down at some point in the future, not only do you get the benefit of that lower rate, but you've already locked in your home price now versus, at some point in the future when you're going to be buying at a higher price. So in summary, North Shore Pump remains one of the strongest, most resilient pockets in Central Virginia. The rules have changed slightly. We've got a little bit more leverage in the buyer's hands. If you're buying or selling here in 2026, strategy matters more than ever. If a move is in your future in 2026, we would love the opportunity to earn your business. Feel free to send a DM, put a comment, send a smoke signal, send a carrier pigeon. Thank you for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you next month.